we're having a discussion around Black Lives Matter, and you have an organization like the police where every officer was white. Whose perspective would you rely on to have a wholesome conversation about Black Lives Matter? If you have no Black officers in your organization that you can say, hey, can we sit down and have a conversation about this situation? I'm trying to learn what the community experience is. Well, if you don't have that mosaic within your organization, who are you relying upon in order to give you that information? So it becomes very important that you have a diverse workforce so that when you're having those conversations about different situations that come up in policing, you can rely upon your members to then give you information. I grew up afraid of the police. My parents grew up during the civil rights movement. So my parents' perception was that the police were an extension of oppressive government. So they would see the videos like Martin Luther King and his peaceful marches, and they would see police and the canines and all that kind of stuff that you see in the videos. And that's how they use that to frame their perception of police. My mom would always say, if you see the police, you run. Right? So there's just this inherent fear that if I was engaged in the police in any capacity, that it could only come to be a negative experience for me. Ironically, there were 3 officers in the Pickering station that used to stop me all the time as a kid. And they would just stop me just to say hi, just talk to me. And that followed me right all the way through public school. If they saw me, they would never just drive past me. They would stop me, talk to me, and go on. And that followed me for a long time. And I kept thinking, I want to do what they did, because they changed my perception based on that engagement. And so around 22, I started going through the process of becoming a police officer because I wanted to do what they did. Was doing the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion probably started around 15 years ago, but I quite honestly didn't know I was doing it. My inspector at the time came up to me and said, there's going to be this diversity position in our service where we're going to have this officer that would be a diversity practitioner and help usher in our diversity strategies and that type of stuff. And I said, why are you asking me? And he said, Keith, you're already doing the work. And so he started giving me examples of things that I was doing that I had. Well, obviously I knew I was doing, but I just didn't really put the context together. So I said, you know what, he's right. And so when the position came up for a diversity, equity, inclusion officer, I jumped at it and went through the whole process and auditioning. I was successful. I then realized while I was doing it, I still didn't realize the significance of doing it at that point. And it wasn't until I had a lot of training where I started realizing the significance of it. Probably the most important is public confidence. That takes a lot, because it can take you years to build up public trust or anybody's trust, and you can destroy it in minutes. And so I realized that public trust is huge. And in order for the public to have confidence in the work that we're doing, we have to make sure that it's all inclusive. And so the importance of it was that, one, it allowed me to do some training with our members, and it's kind of twofold. So one, it was to allow us to have training for our members, so that they were, one, treating each other with respect in the workplace, but that they were also transferring that respect to members of the public. My example is you cannot wait till crisis to then start getting to know one another. You cannot wait till crisis to start building a relationship, right? So all hell's breaking loose, and this is what's happening with the police and the community members. That's not the good time to build the relationship. What we should be doing is building relationships from the start when there isn't an issue. Because then, one, it also feels like it's more genuine. And especially to see the current climate where there's a lot of anti-police sentiment going around, or anti-establishment sentiment, or anti-government sentiment, is for my office and for what we do, I've already built those relationships years ago. I can call pretty much any demographic, any community member, any faith base within Durham region, and they all know me on a first name basis because I didn't wait till crisis to develop those relationships. We need diversity, equity, and inclusion training because every member of the public is different. We can't just go into people's lives and expect the same outcome if we do the same thing. The reality is you can do the same thing and still have a different reaction from people. We'll have a lot of officers that'll say, you know what, Keith, I don't see color. And I'll say, well, that's unfortunate, because what you're trying to say is not that I don't see color. What you're trying to say is that I see your color, but it is not relevant to me or relevant to my relationship with you. Depending on who you say that to, they might actually be offended by that. Because if you say you don't see color, you're actually saying, I don't see you, right? Instead of saying, I do see you, and I don't have an issue with who you are, and actually embrace who you are because of who you are. And so it's teaching our members how to properly communicate with the public, how to properly communicate with each other, how to properly understand the nuances of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So by giving our officers implicit bias training where they can then go into the community and serve community members fair and equitably. The biggest issue though with that type of training is you first have to be aware of what your biases are. And that's usually the hardest part of the training, is being able to get people to suss out what their biases are. Because everybody has bias, but they might be different. It might depend on what your parents' views are. It might depend where you grew up. It might depend what your friend network is or what media that you're exposed to online. So, we do this training because we're expecting that our members will go out and treat everybody fair and equitably, but treat them based on that specific nuance of that community engagement at that time. And it's obviously going to ebb and flow based on the events that are presented to the member. But we gotta work on our members having that awareness first. And so that becomes paramount in policing, is how do you suss that out so that your members can go out into the community and not offend people and actually embrace the situation so that it instills public confidence while still being able to uphold the law. And it's very technical. There's a lot of resources that go into teaching your members how to do that, but it's worthwhile. Looking at my perfect police force is saying, hey, every one of that 900 that wear this uniform need to make contributions and efforts to develop those relationships with the community before there's crisis. That would be a perfect world for me.